Just one cornetto. That's all I ask. Florence. Mary, I was in Italy last week. Pisa, Florence, you were missing out.
Yeah, thanks for reminding me. You have a good time then? Because you're dying to tell us.
Italy is a special place, I have to say. Florence especially. So if you ever get a chance, I would recommend it. Not that I'm knocking Pisa.
I was going to say, have you been anywhere else in Italy?
Not this time, but I've been to Rome and I've been to Naples.
All right, fair enough then.
So there, yeah, pretty mad, no? Where were you this summer? This is, of course, our first podcast, and there's a parrot, green parrot, walking next to us, which is actually quite good for the theme of today's podcast. A cockatoo. I don't know birds.
We have an app to detect, bird chirps like now.
That's true, actually. But at the start of the summer, we were going around the parks, checking the sounds of the birds. And if you try to imitate the sound of the bird, it would just say human being. You could never trick it. But this is our first podcast for the post-summer. This is a new season, and bizarrely not an interview. It's like we've done 17 million interviews in a row. Not that we're complaining, they're fantastic as well, but this is like an off the cuff podcast. We're just talking, chatting, vibing, talking about culture, and we're in Retiro, so we're not even using the Bluebell, Snowbell the blue microphone. We're using another microphone in the park, so there might be some ambient sounds, which will be nice for you, the listener, I think, with the sounds of the trees rustling and the birds and all that. In fact, I had a girl here from home, a friend. That sounded a bit suspicious. Who never seen this park before. Now she's teaching in Marbella, and she came here. Yeah, I mentioned this to you, and she loved this place. This is something that we don't have in Ireland. This type of kind of royal park. It's amazing.
We might as well just send a hi to Lucia.
That's exactly it. The mysterious friend from home. And where did you jet off to? This summer?
I was in Navarra for a while, so close to the Pyrenees, so that's always a nice part of Spain to go to, and yeah, lots of castles and just nice landscapes, very quiet, nice.
Very good. At this juncture, I should say that I brought you back a very nice Italian moped as a present, and you brought me back a bunch of rocks. Is that correct?
Well, suppose technically it is. What's wrong with that?
There's nothing wrong with that. There's fossils in them. Some of them are from Africa. No, there's a lovely collection, especially on a Zara home dish or tray as well. So I'm just showing off my latest presents. But, this is going to be, as I said, a loose, casual, there's a guy sneezing in the background, kind of podcast. And we're going to put this into two parts. We've seen two exhibitions recently. First part, which is this part, we'll talk about one of them, have a nice musical interlude after that, and we'll talk about the second exhibition that we saw in the Leica Museum. And then we'll finish this little podcast today and come back pretty soon with another episode. So we are, I think, appropriately in the park because last Thursday we went to see in the La Casa Encendida. We saw an exhibition about plants. And it was a really good one because it was talking about plants and their uses from a almost post-colonial perspective. How plants can also be symbolic of imbalanced power structures, exploitation and slavery, and also how they can be used for good and for bad in the modern world, and spectacular stuff. I know as well it really registered with you. So was there any particular parts of the exhibition that you want to start talking about?
We can start talking about the mandrake, this plant that was quite popular, especially from the Middle Ages, because the roots look like a human body. So it's quite peculiar because it turns out there's like a school of thought. It started being philosophers in in the first century, they developed this theory that things that looked like something cured that something. So, for example, if something looked like the body, then it helped cure the body, and if something looked like, I don't know, say an eye, then it helped cure eye ailments. And it's funny because nowadays, with homeotherapy and those sort of
Alternative medicines.
That's one of the beliefs. Obviously, nowadays it's kind of like scientifically proven not to
work.
To work, at least from a scientific point of view. But it's peculiar how they in antiquity and it's lasted throughout history. They had this concept that just because something had the shape of something, it meant it was meant to cure that thing.
Fantastic science around that belief, undoubtedly. And also other aspects of this, there's two rooms. The second room really didn't have much, but the first room was where that information was concentrated and other things as well. So for example, they mention something from South Latin America. What's it called again? Chicharron? Or is that a sausage?
I don't know what you're talking about.
It's like a herb or a plant. We'll put it in the description, don't worry, so you know exactly what we're talking about. But they were talking about in the exhibition how this is an example of how when you go to a new land as a colonizer, you corner the market. You take this natural product and the local people don't have access to it because it gets taken to Europe and the Western world, for example. This is what happened in the 19th century and before that as well. And I think that's quite interesting because we were discussing after the podcast, or after the visit to the museum rather, that you can probably say this about ayahuasca today. So for people who don't know what ayahuasca is, it's this medicinal drink you take with a shaman type of figure to cleanse your body. You usually end up vomiting quite a lot and having very lucid dreams. But unfortunately, it's kind of become very vogue with kind of hippie wankers that like going to Latin America. Not all of them, because I know one or two listen to this podcast who aren't quite like that.
You know who you are.
Not Lucia this time.
No,
but and what had happened is you get a lot of people who are Westerners going over there and opening up these type of centers or places where you can go and consume it and have these experiences. And again, you're denying access to the local knowledge of what is a local product, and it's become globalized and dominated by a form of capitalism, which is kind of this traveling in an interior sense, and also traveling to Latin America to avail of this. And you have something you want to say about that as well?
No, that is also making it trivial, and there's a big discussion nowadays about traditions, and we're not going to go into like cultural appropriation things, but it's true that some of these things are related to rituals and ceremonies that are very sacred for the people that practice them, the indigenous people. So yeah, it's something else to bear in mind.
There's actually a great documentary on Netflix, I think it's called The Last Shaman, about an American kid who he's in his 20s, but he's very, very depressed, and he actually comes across a Western shaman who eventually leaves him high and dry, and he eventually gets the help he needs from a local shaman. And there's nothing really surprising about that the local versus the blow-in having more of a pedigree or capacity to help people. But I think it's also interesting how we view certain things, because I think all these health fads as well, and superfoods we're mentioning as well, things like aguacate as well. What's that in English? Avocado, all these. So I've become so native here in Spain.
Yeah.
But these are taken from other parts of the world, but there's a chain there that isn't maybe always so nice, and it's in the control of mafia. So our relationship to food, we think plants are these really serene things. They look beautiful, but they can be very representative of things that are not ethical. So if you're spreading it on your toast, where did that come from? It's like green cocaine or ayahuasca, as you mentioned just previously as well. And then they talk about other kind of seeds and things that they mentioned one in Peru, which you can use if you want to rob someone. You can give it to them and they pass out, or even to take advantage of someone. So it's just interesting, because we were talking as well over the weekends about, Russell Brand had a podcast about this as well, where he talks about how we assume plants are, as I mentioned, just these beautiful things for decoration, but they have their own trajectory. There's evidence that they have memory, according to some studies. If you play a recording of an insect biting a plant, they will release things into their skin or into their substance to make it less palatable for the insect. So they have these reactions and this type of intelligence and consciousness, and not the same type of consciousness as us, of course, but their own version of it. And it's just opening up our way of looking at how we interact with the natural worlds. This exhibition is specifically about the kind of post-colonial context, but there are other ways of looking at it as well. So I think it's really engaging. Now, that was actually the second thing we saw in La Casa Encendida, because we originally went to see something about refugees and Instagram and all of these things. So maybe you can take up that story as well.
It was about Moria, the refugee camp in Lesbos in Greece, and it was a project. Well, it is a project. It's called Now You See Me, and it's an Instagram account, and they basically the families that live there post pictures and talk about their experiences. And there were quite a few posts from an Afghan family, incidentally, but it was from a few months ago, and they just showed the conditions in which they lived, which of course were terrible. The tents that they had, some of them were completely inundated by water and very dirty, and even the facilities were poor and little for how many people there were there. And one of the things that struck me was that one of the posts said that nights were really long, so it's like these people were there waiting to get to Europe, and then every night that they were there, it felt for them like they were just pointlessly wasting time to get to their destination, but they've been there for so long now. It's almost like everybody's forgotten that they're still there.
I think what's striking about this exhibition as well is the fact that we've seen a lot of exhibitions about refugees in Casa Arabe in particular, and I mentioned to you while we were there that I feel that this is probably maybe the most direct coverage of the issue, because we've seen other ones where they focus on the letters that they write, which highlights their emotional anguish, the bureaucratic hoops that they have to jump through. We've seen kind of representations of what the camps look like with different, with plasticine and wire and rendered with different artistic methods. But this is actually the first time we actually see just an unfiltered almost view of what life is like in the camps. And another thing, in this particular camp I should say, another thing that's interesting is that on the second floor the exhibition continues, and there's a website, because people were posting these things, and then a Spanish photographer saw them and they initiated this Instagram campaign together, and now there's a website where you can download the images and make them into posters and put them in your university or different parts. So it is an exhibition and also an initiative of photographs that does call for action as well. So I think there is quite a lot to that as well. But yeah, so if you're in town, I would recommend going to this museum to see both of those things.
Yeah, even on Instagram, the account of like Now You See Me, Moria, and it's got basically, apart from pictures, a lot of the things that we saw in the exhibition were screenshots of their Instagram account. So.
That's a great idea, actually. Yeah, check out the Instagram accounts. And for now, well, it's time for our little musical interlude here. I'll be back with part 2. Welcome back to part 2. So today we saw, what is it about Barcelona and photographers, and what is it about photographers in the Civil War of Spain losing photographs in suitcases that are later recovered? These are the two questions coming from our, and I asked that question, a woman walks past, intrigued, I think, by the questions I'm posing here. We went to the Leica shop in Madrid today, and down below there is an exhibition of this Catalan photographer, Spanish photographer, or where's he from?
Yes, yes.
Okay, that's good to know. It's still fresh in my mind. It's just a jumble of
I
things that we've seen.
I was thinking of the name.
Oh, don't worry. Again, another thing for the description.
Campañà.
Antoni Campañà.
Yeah, well, you're not in Italy anymore.
I think his first name is Alberti.
Alberti.
Yeah. Pronunciation needs to be checked. But yeah, so most of these were about Spain. These aren't Civil War photographs, but they are on the cusp of the Civil War, really. And there are photographs as well, like of kids looking underneath a circus tent's canvas. There's like a curiosity there. There's a couple of great shots of Barcelona playing, one in the Camp Nou and one in their previous stadium, and it's just spectacular. And also pictures of the last time there was a religious festival before the war started, and they wouldn't be seen again until the war was over. So almost like an interruption of festivities and normal life. We can catalogue that through seeing the things that people are doing every year as part of their normal calendar, these red letter days. And also some kind of interesting things. There's a picture of a statue of Lenin in Brussels. There's something involving Stalin in Barcelona as well. And also in 1933, I think, there was a motor race, and there's a picture of a swastika in the background as well. So presumably a German pilot in one of those cars or machines.
1936.
1936 it was. So, yeah, as I mentioned, as I alluded to, he's a photographer who has some renown, but these photographs were lost until found in a suitcase. And he's from Barcelona, and Barcelona seems to be a factory of photographers. But this is the Leica store. We've done other podcasts as well about Joseph Roth and all these people in the 20s taking pictures as well. So these are men and women who took pictures as part of a wider context as well, documenting everything. I enjoyed it. Did you?
I did very much. It was interesting. I was left wondering exactly how, because in the description at the beginning, that normally we're never too keen on, but this one was informative. But it sort of said that this red box that was discovered, gives a different view of the Republican side in Spain, Spanish Civil War. And I was sort of like left with, wanting to know what, from the point of view, what other side it showed. But apart from that, they were quite peculiar, the photos, because perhaps they showed things that don't normally feature quite as much because of being just before the war and just after. And yeah, details like what you were saying about the swastika and sports events. There were quite a few, like this. Barca fans putting chairs over their heads to cover from the rain, which was quite funny. And this thing that they used to take pictures of them from the back, and that's how they got their nickname of culés. So basically, backsiders, kind of, I suppose is the translation. So it was interesting. Only very small, I would say maybe 30 pictures in total, something like that, 30, 40 pictures. But it was nice enough. I think you can never get enough of seeing pictures from that period, and kind of like completing the picture that the stereotypical picture that you have of that period, especially if you're Spanish and depending on your background. But here you have many different things, and even sometimes things like what you were saying, the circus and things like sports events give you a different perspective. No?
I think, it's a great description. I think why it's maybe a different angle at the Republican side is because it's a strange one, because it hints at the anti-clericalness. It doesn't actually show it. You don't see that in the photographs, but I think because we've seen a couple of Civil War photographic exhibitions together, and I don't think we've saw any example of the Republicans maybe burning churches and those things. We didn't see that today either, but there's definitely an inference that, well, this was the last time this could happen, and it's left open to interpretation, shall we say. So that's one theory as to why maybe this was showing another side of the Republican part of the Civil War, or not. I don't know.
I wouldn't know what to say to that. I think it is a typical thing to show, churches being burned and things like that, and that's what I meant by the stereotypical sort of image that we are, at least like Spanish people, are used to seeing. But then I think the interesting thing about him was that if you didn't know kind of like what side he was in, you might not be able to guess. And I think that's interesting because obviously it's a moment where people like position themselves, and well, probably rightly so. But I think what you were saying about the ambiguity, I think that's probably quite interesting. So yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. So now, as there seems to be more vehicles passing by and marathon runners, we'll wrap this up now. You can find us on Instagram, L_ARPA_, Twitter, LARPA1, Facebook, LARPA Media. What are we on Facebook?
LARPA. Right, in translation history. If you put LARPA, is enough.
And we're very excited because we're going to be signing a copy of our novel pretty soon. We're actually in the park.
Like 50 meters away.
50 meters away. We're looking at the first kiosk going up for the book fair as well. So all exciting stuff. So, well, from the new season of this podcast, this is me saying good luck.
And me saying bye.